Good afternoon. My name is Ian Proud and I'm the Peacemonger. Today is Thursday, the 5th of February, and I want to talk about Keir Starmer's appointment of Jeffrey Epstein's long-term friend, Peter Mandelson, as British ambassador to Washington for 7 months from February to September 2025. It's quite rare, though not uncommon, for Britain's ambassadors to be political appointees. Both the Conservative and the Labour governments have occasionally appointed members of their parties to plumb diplomatic roles. For example, David Cameron made his Chief of Staff, Ed Llewellyn, ambassador to Paris before he left office as a parting gift. Lord Mandelson's appointment as ambassador to Washington was different in that an appointment to the role had already been made in Sir Tim Barrow, now Lord Barrow, former ambassador to Moscow, who at that time was the most senior and experienced British diplomat at the Foreign Office. Even before the July 2024 general election, it was understood that Tim had been nominated by Rishi Sunak to become the next British ambassador to Washington, which prompted an angry reaction from the Labour Party, leading to the appointment being frozen under pre-election what we call purdah rules, that you can't make big decisions in a general election build-up. This was foolish petty politics by Keir Starmer, who clearly wanted to engineer his own man into the job. I work closely with Tim in Moscow and can attest to the fact that he is an exceptional diplomat and would have been perfect for the Washington role. For example, he was always very pragmatic on Russia, one of the key policy areas for discussion between the UK and US since 2014. He would have engaged well with the current Trump administration's change of policy direction and been able to shape subtly UK policy in Whitehall in the way that I think Mandelson never could. Mandelson perhaps was the author of the flatter Trump policy, in which the UK would cling on to its hardline position on the Ukraine war, yet hope that Team Trump would notice as they pushed for peace. Even though he was successful in engineering a second state visit to the UK for Trump, the policy schism on Ukraine only seemed to grow wider under Mandelson's watch. Shortly after the Alaska summit between Trump and Putin, Britain and Europe had become seemingly at odds with the US on Ukraine policy, a division that appears to remain wide open to this day. And Keir Starmer appeared fully lined up behind that policy. In fact, he's really the author of that policy. In large part, that must be down to the advice he was receiving from Mandelson in Washington. I believe that Tim Barrow would have encouraged a nuanced retreat from the UK foreign policy position that had been locked in place since the early part of 2015, to align more closely with the US and to apply greater influence in Europe to come to the table rather than backing Zelensky at every turn. Tim was undoubtedly behind the shift in UK policy towards Russia that briefly took place at the end of 2017 while Boris Johnson was then Foreign Secretary. Yes, Tim would have flattered Team Trump. He is an exceptional diplomat, but there would have been policy substance there too, which Mandelson simply didn't have or didn't seem to apply in any credible way. So it was Keir Starmer's personal choice to shove Tim to one side, leaving him without a job, and ultimately leading him to being shuffled off to the House of Lords. I mean, not the worst sinecure, I suppose. And in any case, that's a small matter when compared to Starmer's knowledge of Mandelson's long-time friendship with pedophile sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. We now know, and Starmer has admitted, that he knew about Mandelson's long-term friendship with Epstein when giving him the job. Starmer's appointment of Mandelson was made 19 years after Epstein was first investigated by the Florida police for paedophilia after a 14-year-old girl alleged being molested at his mansion. Without going into the extensive details of the case, he was imprisoned, Jeffrey Epstein, for 13 months in 2008, and after his release faced widespread allegations from women claiming to have been abused by him. He was indicted in 2019 on people trafficking charges and would later commit suicide in jail. This was 6 years before Mandelson was given the British ambassador job in Washington. when the full and horrendous details of Epstein's heinous crimes were well known and widely reported, including in the context of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Starmer has now said that while he knew about Mandelson's relationship, he was repeatedly lied to. But Starmer is naive if he believes that even a cursory knowledge of the relationship and its duration was not already enough to disbar Mandelson from the role. Why? Because Starmer would have known that Mandelson would be given regular and unfettered access to top secret intelligence material as part of his role as ambassador. Keir Starmer therefore signed off on someone linked to the most high-profile trafficker of underage girls having access to top secret British intelligence material. Now, having held top secret clearance for 24 years while as a British diplomat, access to intelligence material is vital to the effective performance of your role as a diplomat. It helps you seek to understand the inner workings of the country you serve in, and of course on wider issues too, including on Russia and Ukraine policy. That is one important reason why Britain rarely makes political appointments to senior ambassador jobs, because full-time members of the diplomatic service are appointed and vetted on the basis of their reliability, with the full circumstances of their lifestyle and previous behaviours known about and explored in great detail as part of the process. I find it inconceivable that Mandelson would have been given the Washington job without such security clearance. To obtain that clearance, he would have been extensively interviewed by a vetting officer, as I was many times during the periodic review of your security clearance. Having had many of these periodic vetting interviews, it is not entirely clear to me that Mandelson would have been specifically asked about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, but rather more general questions in which he would be asked to disclose any information that might make him subject to compromise by a foreign intelligence agency. If a vetting officer had known about Mandelson's long-standing friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, I feel quite sure that he would have not been given top secret security clearance. So, and this is a guess, and only a guess, I believe Mandelson would have avoided any mention of his links to Jeffrey Epstein under questioning, although it now appears that those links were known by Keir Starmer. Peter Mandelson would have therefore lied to the vetting officer, as he apparently lied to Keir Starmer. That itself must be subject to an investigation for possible crimes under the Official Secrets Act. There has been nothing to suggest that Peter Mandelson had not been given the requisite security clearance and the associated access to intelligence material while he was posted to Washington for a period of 7 months. He would undoubtedly have been briefed on a regular basis by MI6 staff at the embassy in Washington. Peter Mandelson was already known to be a deeply dishonest person, having been forced to resign on 2 occasions from the Labour cabinet, including for taking a large sum of money to buy a house and not disclosing that. With that in mind, Keir Starmer should have exercised much more caution when steamrolling Mandelson's appointment through against a much better and more skilled and, importantly, security cleared diplomat like Tim Barrow. Simply knowing that Peter Mandelson had a long-standing friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, even if he did not know its full extent, Keir Starmer nevertheless signed off on Mandelson having a role that gave him regular access to British intelligence material. That in itself represents a shocking error of judgment on the Prime Minister's part. And it's for that reason that I believe that Keir Starmer should resign.